All right. Okay, we're live.
We're live.
This is being recorded, so everything you say. Right.
Hey, Judy.
So you may want to.
Good morning.
How are
Exactly.
Good,
It's like,
how are you?
we're gonna try to keep it civilized.
Do you want to copy the itinerary, or like, no, I don't want to be a part of
I'll
that?
be here. I am the itinerary.
You're on camera now.
I'll be here the whole
Okay,
weekend.
camera shot.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I would like a copy. Thank
Okay,
you.
I'll email it to you.
Thank you.
All right. So we're on 142, page 142. And we're going to review the second paragraph on that page, and then we'll go on. So still a discussion about the book of Ecclesiastes, Kohelet. And so in the previous paragraph, they established the kind of kashrut of Ecclesiastes. What is it about Ecclesiastes that allowed them to include it in the Torah, even though there's some controversial ideologies in it, but so they discover something that's important and true to Torah. So now they go on because they had brought up the idea that there are verses in Ecclesiastes that contradict each other, so they tackle those verses. So that's where I am right now. Second paragraph, page 142. Umay devaras sotrim ze et ze. So what verses contradict each other? Ketiv, here's one. Tov ka'as mischok. So anger is better than laughter. So it says that in one place. I mean, they're taking these phrases out of context, but in one context it says that ka'as, which is anger, is better than laughter. Uketiv, and in a different context in the same book, lischok amarti mihulal. In another context it says that about laughter I say we should praise it. It's praiseworthy. So is anger better than it, or is laughter good? So really, is laughter good or is it bad? It seems to be a contradictory opinion. And then it goes on. Another contradiction. Ketiv. V'shibachti ani et simcha. So this is the quote. I praise simcha, which means joy. Uketiv, another place it says. Ula simcha ma ze oseh. And as for joy, what good is it? So it's a conflicting attitude towards joy. One is I praise it. The other says, what good is it? Lo kashya. Okay, this is not. Neither of these are contradictions. You just have to read deeply into it, and you'll see they resolve itself. Tov kas mischok. So, someone's knocking. Anger is better than joy, and now they explain. Anger is better than laughter. Now they explain that. Tov kas sheko'es hakadosh baruch hu ala tzadikim. That the anger that God shows to the righteous, ba'olam hazeh, in this world, that's better. Mischok shemisachek hakadosh baruch hu al rasha'im ba'olam hazeh. That's better than So the anger that God shows righteous people in this world is better than the laughter that God laughs to evil people in this world. Okay, so the anger that God shows good people in this world is just that anger itself is better than the laughter, because ultimately God is going to be laughing at wicked people in the next world. So that the laughter that he's showing that they're seemingly hearing, the wicked people are seemingly hearing in this world, is actually something that's going to rebound against them. And when it feels to us righteous people that God is angry at us, so that anger is going to resolve itself in the next world. So that anger is actually better than the laughter that God laughs at the bad people. And then it goes on, Lischok amarti mihulal. And when it says that I praise schok, or I praise laughter, zeh schok misachek hakadosh baruch hu im hatzadikim ba'olam haba. That's the laughter that God laughs with righteous people in the next world. All right. So a lot of interesting sort of principles or ideas about laughter. There's good laughter, there's bad laughter. The idea here is that God is sort of laughing at wicked people, because understanding that eventually they're going to get their ultimate punishment in this world. Sorry? It's an unpleasant attitude. So what?
It's a mixed message.
I hate to think of that being
Right. So you don't like to think of God as sarcastically laughing at wicked people too. Although the rabbis are trying to resolve it. I mean, the rabbis are sort of trying to resolve, which is the kind of eternal dilemma. Why is it that righteous people suffer in this world? Right. And they're saying, well, that suffering, which may appear to you to be God's anger, is in fact not God's anger, but something that will resolve in the next world. And also, why are wicked people prospering? Because they see that all the time. So then it's the same thing. So what seems to be sort of God's favor for wicked people in this world will resolve itself, and that righteous people will get the last laugh. It's true. It's true that they will portray God as sarcastic sometimes, and then the wicked people bear the brunt of that. It's true. It's not entirely pleasant. One would think of God as loving all the time, loves good people, loves bad people, but they will portray an image of God as, punishing, sarcastic.
But
They weren't uncomfortable with that.
I think it's also not very comforting to think that I'm being punished because I'm good, or God is angry with me because I'm good.
It's not comforting.
It's not comforting, even though in the next life maybe things will be better.
Right. Look, I think it could be comforting to some people. Wait, patience. In some ways, the advice there to a suffering person is just patience. Things are going to work out. Right, what you're going through right now. In fact, it doesn't actually say that it's actually God's anger. That people experience it as God's anger. What you now in your suffering are experiencing as God's anger will ultimately resolve itself, if not in this world, in the next world. Yes. Does that really work? Well, I tell you, it works for people that have faith.
Right.
If you have your doubts about whether there is a next world or not, it's not going to work very well. It's not going to work very well for you. Yeah. So they believed, and they believed that, and it's not a ridiculous belief. A lot of people believe it. So, in fact, for a lot of people, it resolves sort of the basic imperfection of this world. Why are things so messed up? Why do innocent people suffer? How come there's so many wicked people that are doing so well? So in the next world, it resolves. And this is their way of saying it.
Yeah. It seems to me like a really un-Jewish attitude. It certainly never came across it. It was always
What's un-Jewish about it?
That you're going to get comfort in the next world. But I think that's a very Christian.
That's the point that it is Christian.
I don't think that's.
Well, it's the Talmud.
I know. My teachers always thought that this world wasn't mattered to Jewish people. No.
Yeah. So to me, it's a question of emphasis. So Judaism certainly has ideas about the next world. They certainly kind of create this construct where the next world resolves a lot of the terrible inequities in this world. Judaism certainly has that. I would say Christianity emphasizes it more. It becomes really central to Christianity. But you see it in the Talmud. It was very, very common for rabbis to engage in this discussion. Now, if you were to wake up one of these rabbis in the middle of the night and say, what's the most important thing to do as a Jew? They wouldn't say, wait for the next world. They would say, look, we have to perfect this world now. And maybe, a righteous Christian would say, wait till the next world. I don't know. So it's a matter of emphasis. But Judaism has these ideas. And
I didn't know that until when my dad died and I read about afterlife and what was the expectation.
Yeah.
I never really learned that growing up Jewish in a conservative world.
Yeah.
But I do know from my involvement with the more observant community,
right.
that is very much very, very driven home message about doing deeds right now
for the next world. Yeah.
So you may have not learned about that very much, but it's very much out there in the Jewish and the Talmud.
I think our generation. I'm going to say all of us roughly our age. Within like a 30-year span. A lot of our educations were faulty about that because it was when we were taught about Judaism as kids, it was an age of real rationality, and the idea of the next world seemed irrational. It seemed like a Baba Misa, like a like superstition, and their aim was to make Judaism seem like the rational religion, and really, and I think that was in the air when we were kids and we were being taught about Judaism. Especially in the non-Orthodox world, but even in the Orthodox world to some extent, and it wasn't accurate. Now, it wasn't totally inaccurate because again, Christianity emphasizes this stuff more, but it's very clearly in Judaism, and it's true. If you spend time in observant communities, it's not dominant, but it's in the air. Certainly, when somebody passes away, it's all over the place. And yeah.
Well, I think it was in the Maccabees to the Mishnah book, but the Pharisees, as far back as the Pharisees, went so far as to say if you didn't believe in the afterlife, you couldn't go.
Right. Yeah, that's It's a great rule. Yeah.
But for somebody,
Right. Who doesn't merit the world to come? If you don't believe in the world to come. But then if you don't believe in it, who cares? Like, what do you care? Like, I don't believe in it. So it's not a punishment. So it's sort of this circular logic that ultimately it does include everybody. It's like, if you believe in it, if you believe in fairies, there are fairies. And if you don't, then there aren't. I'm actually, by the way, I'm not comparing the two beliefs. But what I'm actually saying is, in the end, it comes down to faith, right? Is someone going to convince me that this is true, that there's a world to come? No. All I'm saying is that it's a legitimate Jewish belief. It's part of our structure of belief.
But it's very difficult for living in an environment like we do in this country, where so much is so good now, supposedly for us, personally, etc. When you live in an environment where things are never good, and they don't get any better, and you suffer, you have to have an alternative for hopefulness.
So that's probably true. I mean, that's probably true. Although people suffer everywhere. I mean, so there's great suffering even in prosperous societies. And look, I mean, there's two things you could say about this. One is that you could have a psychological explanation for it. We need this as a sense of hope, so we invented it. Maybe not consciously invented it, but sort of we conjured it up as a way to give us hope and a sense of working out why this world seems so unfair. That's one way of looking at it. That's sort of a sociological, psychological, anthropological. Another is that it's true. Right? It just happens to be true. We sense that it's true in ways that we can't prove to anybody, but there's sort of spiritual senses that are activated by this idea, and therefore it's true. It's hard to convince anybody that it's true, but we feel that it's true, and that's why we have it in the texts. So either the rabbis were sort of inventing it for psychological reasons, or they were great spiritual giants, and they intuited that this is true based on their study and their own sense of what God's world is. Who knows? You can choose then which approach you prefer.
I read an article yesterday that also says there's some evolutionary content to the whole question of belief in God.
Yeah,
in fact,
yeah,
because it was those who had
survival
an intuitive sense of something else around them would survive.
Had a better chance of surviving.
Better chance of surviving.
So they passed down their genes. So it's a Darwinian explanation, not just for the afterlife, but for religion in general.
Right.
Yes, I read the same article. I forgot.
Say it again, please.
Say it again.
This article talked about an evolutionary element to the belief in God, and that is that those people who were more sensitive to their surroundings, not necessarily everything physical in front of them, but more intuitive about other things potentially having some effect on them, were the ones who survived, and therefore evolutionarily. That's a word. More of those people who think about things that are outside the realm of immediate reality. It's an evolutionary. The notion of the fittest survive.
Yes.
So those who survived were those who were aware of their surroundings more than just that was what.
Yeah. So they would sense, there's an animal out there. So I'm going out there. I'm going out of my cave. I'm going out of my cave. And if I'm just looking at my surroundings, just there's that tree ahead of me, and I'm not sort of like thinking, what else is out there? Then the saber-toothed tiger is going to come and eat me, and my genes aren't going to be passed on. But if I'm the type of person that I'm not just looking at my surroundings, but I'm also sort of thinking vaguely, there's something else out there I better be aware of, and I can't see it, but then I'm more likely to survive the attack, and then my genes will be passed on. And that's how evolution works. So this is just a theory, that this sense that I have a sense of something beyond my immediate surroundings and beyond my senses, that's ultimately becomes religion. And religion becomes human, right? Becomes human because of those genes that are sensitive to the surroundings and things that may actually not be there.
And paranoia with Jews.
Paranoia, yeah. And complaining. I said that too. So paranoia and complaining are survival mechanisms. That's why Jews have survived for so long. I sort of mean it, yeah. I do, yeah. Last comment, and we got to go on in this.
This could be more than a theory, because they found genetic predisposition for political leanings. You wouldn't think that there would be such a thing, but they've actually
Yeah,
found it.
they're going to find genetic predispositions
Yeah,
for
exactly.
everything, and that honestly that's my critique of all this too. Is it's really reductionist. So
Absolutely.
any human phenomena, they're going to find a way to make it. Oh, that's a survival mechanism, and it's all explained by Darwin. And then suddenly there's nothing else.
Right.
There's nothing else but our genes and our cells. And I sort of object to that, but it's interesting.
Gets to the absurd.
Yeah. Okay. Third paragraph. V'shibachti et ani simcha. Okay, so this is referring to another contradiction they find. I praise joy. That's simcha shel mitzvah. So specifically, the Talmud interprets that as when the guy says, I praise simcha, joy, I'm only referring to the joy, the simcha that comes from performing a mitzvah, right? A religious act, which is a particular kind of joy, right? It's not the same joy as going dancing, which may be great, right? Or having a couple drinks and then going dancing, which could make you very happy. So here's the distinction really between joy and happiness, or let's say momentary happiness, because they're really trying to focus on what is the joy that Kohelet, that Ecclesiastes is praising. So now the rabbis say this is that joy, this kind of deep feeling of doing one of God's commandments, putting yourself in that frame of mind, the connecting yourself to God through the commandments. Okay.
I picked up on that.
Yeah.
Good.
Ula simcha ma ze oseh, and then the phrase joy, what good is it? Zo simcha she'eina shel mitzvah. That's simcha, that's joy that doesn't come through a commandment. So dividing the world of simcha into two different worlds, right? There's a simcha that comes from the commandments, right? The joy, the feeling of togetherness, however you want to characterize it, that comes from the commandments. That's a kind of joy, and there's a kind of joy that doesn't come from the commandments. So what's that?
Momentary pleasure.
Like what?
What Noah did.
Getting drunk.
Got him drunk.
All right. Yeah. Secular joys. Right. So for them, Ecclesiastes is saying, what good is that? Ultimately, what ultimate value is that? There is an ultimate value to joy, but it's only a joy where you're connecting yourself to God and the Jewish people through the act of mitzvah. That has the potential to create a tremendous eternal joy. The other kind of joy, simcha, happiness, whatever you want to call it, they're not exactly critiquing that, but saying that there's not an ultimate value in that.
Okay, so
It's ephemeral.
Right.
so there are brachot for everything.
There are.
So you can say bracha if you see a beautiful woman,
Yeah.
or you can. So there are kinds of joys that you can
Yeah.
connect.
No, you can say a blessing
that's
before.
the way you think.
You can say blessing
Drinking
before.
wine, right?
Yeah, you say blessing before you drink. Yeah. So
Right.
Judaism happens to have the advantage of connecting almost every human activity to a mitzvah, through saying of a blessing. I mean, sharing your food. So you're eating.
Right.
So sharing your food right away. You're eating with another person. So the possibility of inviting mitzvah into almost every moment, into almost every human activity. So that's what the rabbis are suggesting too. Because it could be they're saying, look, the only joy we really recognize is when you're davening in shul. But they don't say that. So they say it's a mitzvah, and we know we have this sort of total system where you can inject a mitzvah into almost anything that you do. Right. So that's true. It's a good point, but it's absolutely true. It only works in a system where at least you have the potential to bring God into every single act. And in Judaism, you do. Right. Okay. So, but here's a phrase from the Talmud that I've struggled with for many, many years, and I'm still unpacking it and trying to understand the implications of it. So I'll just read it, and then we'll see if we want to talk about it more. Lilamedcha, this teaches you, and here's the phrase: She'ein shchina shora, lo mitoch atzvut, velo mitoch atzlut, velo mitoch schok, velo mitoch kalut rosh, velo mitoch sicha, velo mitoch dvarim betelim, ella mitoch devar simcha shel mitzvah. All right. So, I mean, you can see the translation in front of you. It's hard to translate it fully, but the Shekhinah. So first of all, it doesn't necessarily mean God in God's fullness. The Shekhinah, that element of God, the element of God that's closest to us, doesn't come, lo shira, doesn't alight on us. We don't become aware of God's presence if there is sadness, that's atzvut, or atzlut is laziness. Schok means laughter, but they mean sort of trivial laughter. V'lo mitoch kalut rosh. So kalut rosh is sort of triviality. Lo mitoch sicha, idle chatter, doesn't come through idle chatter. Lo mitoch dvarim betelim, empty chatter, which is like gossip. Ella. So if you want to bring the Shekhinah to you, here's how you do it. Ella mitoch dvar simcha shel mitzvah. Joy, but joy that comes from doing a commandment. That's how you bring God. That's how you bring God. It's not so much that's how you bring God. God will not appear through these others, through sadness. God will appear through sadness or laziness or idle things or gossip. God will appear during the joy of a commandment. All right. So I will say that this is you can see why I struggled with it. There's something really counterintuitive about it, especially in this group, by the way, because a lot of us feel a strong presence of God in sadness. So because of the sadness, because of sort of the pain in our lives, the hole in your life when you lose somebody, a lot of us feel like a deep and profound presence of God then. So how could this possibly say God doesn't come through sadness? So it makes you try to, you look at this and you try to figure out, what does that mean? What kind of sadness is the rabbi here talking about? And I have some ideas.
Loss of a parent or loss of...
I know, but it's suggesting here that God will not come into your life through sadness, that somehow the sadness has to be transformed into joy before the Shekhinah sort of alights on you, enters the picture. It's a very carefully worded statement. It doesn't say that God will not be there when you're sad, but it says the Shekhinah doesn't alight on you during times of sadness. The Shekhinah alights on you only during times of joy that are coming from the act of mitzvah.
There's an element of selfishness in sadness. Sadness in the sense of loss. You focus on yourself and what that means to you, and maybe if you can turn that toward doing some kind of mitzvah, then that kind of both helps you and helps opens up.
Rabbi, is sadness a good translation of the Hebrew word?
Yeah, but it's not. It's an accurate translation. It probably doesn't capture exactly what this rabbi here means by it. But why do you say that?
Because I mean, sadness when there's a loss, when you experience a loss, is one type of sadness. There are other kinds of sadness out there too.
Right.
You can be sad about other things. You can be sad that the
Chargers lost.
The Chargers lost.
It
was a messy game.
Right.
You can be sad about.
Or you're sad because you don't get your way.
Exactly.
And you want to get your way, you don't get your way.
You're in a whole different world.
Right.
Versus sadness.
Right.
When you have.
Okay. So let me say. So you could redefine sadness. And I have some thoughts about that. It still seems kind of harsh and limiting to say that God will only come during times of joy and the joy of a mitzvah. So am I expected to suddenly feel joy, the day after a parent passes away?
Right.
And look, there's lots of mitzvah in my life. I'm saying Kaddish. I'm davening because there's people that come over. I'm cutting kriya. I'm doing lots of mitzvahs. Mm-hmm. Do those mitzvahs create a sense of joy? And here's where it's also important to look at the word simcha, and and try to kind of get past Western notions of what joy is as fun and happiness, and maybe just like a full emotion versus emotion, like a broken emotion, maybe a feeling of alienation or selfishness, and that's where I think you can start to make sense of this. So 1, 2, 3. So Martha's been waiting.
I was thinking, is it the sadness like a corollary to the other kind of joy, where it's trivial sadness, like you said, the Chargers lost, or I bought a ticket for the lottery and I didn't win, or something like that, as opposed to the kind of a sadness when you lose a loved one.
I mean, luckily, actually, the Talmud will unpack a little bit of this, although it will still leave us frustrated, but it will pack a little bit of this. Unpack a little.
But I don't think I would say joy so much as acceptance.
So acceptance,
with the sadness.
Right.
If you can get to that place.
Yeah, maybe a fullness, a sense of fullness.
Right.
All right, I want to give other people,
I could see maybe the rabbis writing down the Talmud, thinking something like, the Shabbos is a joy, and the end of Shabbos is the end of the joy.
Right.
God might still be there.
Right. Yeah. So yes, I think we all get the idea of the joy of a mitzvah. We get together with friends. We say a few prayers. We feel connected to God. We feel connected to our community, and the end result is joy, and that's really powerful. And we all aspire to that. What's troubling and I'd say difficult about this passage is they're saying that's the exclusive way to bring the Shekhinah into your life. And you're thinking, look, I can't feel that way all the time. It's not. And in fact, there are times when I'm broken, where I need God the most, and also there are times when I'm broken where I feel God's presence the most. So I'm still struggling with that. Look, it may just be somebody's opinion, right? It may not be the Jewish attitude, and he could just be saying, look, everybody, just cheer up. It's better. You're sad. I get it. So go through these mourning processes, but ultimately your goal is to cheer up. And one way you cheer up is through mitzvah. You might just be saying that. Who else was going to?
We just saw an example this morning when Shirley explained what they went through, the sadness and all. But she ended with the 7 grandchildren and this hope. Right.
So this, also but I have to say that this is that reflects sort of the complexity of human emotions that's hard to capture in language. But what we're seeing today, I would say, we were seeing simcha, right? At the same time, was she sad? Of course she's sad, right? But was she joyful? Yeah, there was great joy there too. So it's hard to capture that in language. So the rabbis are using like the word simcha. Let me throw out another possibility in that. So you can feel great sorrow over a loss that was a really important relationship with you, but it was there weren't a lot of things that were left unsaid. It wasn't an unresolved relationship. That's a blessing, right? So you lose a parent. The parent has lots of years, and you feel like you had a really good relationship with that person, and it wasn't an unresolved relationship. So then you feel really sad, of course, because it's a hole in your life. That person was a big part of your life. However, that particular sadness is different, and although there's not necessarily a different word for it, but it's different than, like, you have a loss, and again, it could be a parent, but there's a lot of irresolution in the relationship. You stopped talking to that person 20 years before, and there was a lot that was left unsaid. And you don't feel a fullness in that relationship. All right, so if that's the case, then there's some work you have to do. So in the first case, where there was this fullness of relationship, and the loss is just pure sorrow that comes from losing the relationship, but you're not eating yourself up because of all the unresolved issues in the relationship itself. So then, I'm not going to call that joy. But all the mourning rituals at that point, you can use them to sort of reflect what a wonderful relationship that was, how much I got from that, what a gift that was, how happy I am that I got to know that person, and you can get to simcha a lot quicker. In fact, you're probably already there, even though it feels like sorrow, feels like loss. The other is harder. The other is kind of brokenness, a kind of an emotional shattering. And so you have to work on, I don't know how, but you got to work on that. I will say, because I work with people, that a lot of rabbinic counseling comes from not so much relationships that were really good, because then it's just time. You know what? Time to get over it. But when the relationships were bad and fractured and broken, so then you have to work on that, because you can come to a place. You can come to a place of resolution with those relationships. It just takes some work. You have to think more about it. Well, what did I get out of that relationship? And how if it was my fault, how do I do tshuva? How do I repent? And if it was their fault, how do I forgive them? So the problem is the person's dead, so it's not easy to get there right away. So you have to spend a little time, psychological time, working on those unresolved relationships, even though the person's dead. And then I think the mourning rituals can come in, and you can then reach a place of simcha. So one thing this might be saying is that, so work during your mourning, if it was an unresolved relationship, to try to resolve it. It's possible to do it. Think about what went wrong. Can you forgive yourself? Can you forgive that person? When you get to that place of wholeness and forgiveness, then you're actually at a place of joy, even though it's still a loss. Whereas when you lose, I have to say, for my parents too, all sorts of like crazy unresolved issues. But overall, I had a very good relationship with them. So I was blessed, I think, to have that. Other than the fact that they died young, which I'll never get over. The fact is that it wasn't unresolved. I mean, I had good relationships with both of them, so I feel like during the whole mourning process there was terrible, terrible sadness, but there was also the simcha too. There was, because I was privileged to know these people. There was a huge amount they gave to my life. I've had other losses that haven't been so great. And then I think you spend the time, the psychological time, at least trying to come to some resolution, and then you'll get to a simcha.
I once had some time with an adult therapist.
Yeah.
And she had an interesting device for unresolved issues with a departed one.
Yeah, yeah.
That was to imagine them sitting in a chair,
yeah,
and you're speaking to them,
yeah,
exposing all the unresolved material. Some of it not altogether pleasant.
Yeah. I think that's really important work. I do. You know, whether it's a Gestalt therapist or a book or a rabbi that you talk to, I think it's a really important exercise. And I think the passage is pointing towards that. It's not saying that you shouldn't be sad. It's saying that the goal is that your sadness is redeemed by a sense of fullness in your life. The fullness of mitzvah. So it's fullness versus emptiness.
So how do you get to the fullness?
It's this work. It's psychological work. You examine the relationship, to me, it's the bottom line is forgiveness. You get to forgiveness. You're forgiving yourself. You're forgiving the other person. You're forgiving the other people that got in the way. Steph?
Just real quick, a couple of things. One is the honoring your parents is somewhat of a mitzvah.
Right.
So
right,
you get some joy, and
sure.
even though it's so sad when you're thinking about, saying Kaddish or whatever, you do get some joy out of honoring them.
Yeah. And a lot of people, equate that to coming to Minyan, saying Kaddish, like just all the morning rituals. I'm doing it because it's my obligation to them. It's my last obligation to them, my continuing obligation to them.
It's a gift from them in a way because you're expanding yourself or learning or whatever.
Yeah, so maybe in like sort of English, like don't call it joy. Joy is too much like I'm going to a party. It's not. It's satisfaction. Right.
The other thing is about the forgiveness part. At the burial, right before the burial, there's a prayer about forgiveness. Like all sins forgiven, mine. And I know that when we were doing Shiva, Rabbi Wogelinter came, the Orthodox rabbi, and he talked to me. He said, there's a lot of people who have a lot of baggage. We were very blessed that we didn't. Of course, we had that conversation.
Yeah.
But, I was thinking about my own son. One of them had a lot of anxiety issues, and we were working through this anxiety, and the therapist said, think of it as a big scissors, and think of it as a tomato plant. When all those vines are getting in your way, take out your big scissors and cut them, and you just get through it. And I thought of that when the rabbi said to me, when you're there, throw it all in and bury it. Because if you carry this throughout your life, and your issues throughout your life, it's such heavy baggage on you. You must move on and lift yourself up. Throw it in there, and I thought of it like the scissors, like for the people who do have tons of baggage, instead of, I'm sure Gestalt therapy and lots of therapy are very helpful and necessary for a lot of people, but in some ways, bury it with the dead.
Yeah.
And move on so that you could lift yourself up so you carried it for so long, whatever bad feelings you had in those years that you didn't get along or something, but to carry it on for the next 30 would be punishment.
Oh, for sure.
So
there's no simcha there, right? That's Purat's food, right? And then it's very hard for God to enter your life. I think that's what it's saying too. It's hard for you to open your heart to godliness if you're filled with those resentments. The last thing I'll say though is I think Shiva is a time to work on that.
Yeah.
So if you have, I think that's why you have Shiva. Shiva, you got the time and the space, the mental space, the attitude. I think it's a time to work on that. All right, thanks very much.
Thank you. So Rabbi.